Hey everybody, it's Aaron here with Robert, and welcome to Get Your Geek On's review of the newest Marvel movie, Thor: Love and Thunder.
Thor: Love and Thunder, directed by Taika Waititi, bringing back Natalie Portman, of course, starring Chris
Yes,
Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson. We got Christian Bale in this thing, the voice talents of Taika Waititi, and some other returning cast members as well, which we will talk about. We're gonna do non-spoilers first, and then we'll get into spoilers. This was my most anticipated
it
movie
was. It
of the
really
year.
was.
I was so excited because I love Thor Ragnarok. We got Taika Waititi. So we're going to talk about whether it lived up to the hype or whether it left us feeling a little bit like, I wish it had done more. So we're going to talk about it. But yeah, non-spoilers first. So stick around and listen to that part. And then if you haven't seen it yet, you can stop the video then. And after you see it, check out the spoiler section. So I guess.
Where do you want to start on it? I mean, there was a lot to unpack. I mean, there was Easter eggs that I loved now that's towards the end. I really love some of those. There was some in the beginning, I think. I just didn't care for them as much, I'll say. But I'm a cosmic fan. I love all the cosmic stuff. So when I saw the ones towards the end, I don't think it's a spoiler. Easter eggs aren't spoilers, are they? Do we consider those?
It depends on what they are. So I don't know what you're going to talk about.
The scene. Okay, well, it's not a spoiler. Towards the end, during the big fight scene with everybody, we see them in a room together and we see things on the walls. We saw the Watcher. So do you think is it okay if I say the other ones that we saw, you think? Or should I wait?
I don't even know what you're going to talk about because I didn't necessarily see these. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think it's a spoiler. It's an Easter egg. If you don't want to hear Easter eggs, just plug your ears for like 2 seconds. So in the final fight scene, we get like everybody's fighting, everything's going on. And in the background, you see statues as well. The synopsis of the film essentially is Christian Bale's character, the God Killer, is trying to essentially wipe out all gods of all creation. And in order to do so, we get, and I loved hearing it, we get the ability to him to go find eternity. Yeah. And he's looking for the embodiment of eternity, which is one of the most powerful cosmic characters in the Marvel universe, as he embodies eternity. He embodies everything.
Right.
So we get to like his, I guess, location, and there's the fight breaks out. And on the walls, we see statues of other cosmic beings. The first one we see is Utahu, the Watcher, in one corner. We see the Living Tribunal, who is also another very powerful and cosmic entity.
Right.
I couldn't see the other one on the other side that's like across from the tribunal, but we saw Lady Death. She was in the other opposite corner. Yep. And I was so excited to see her because that maybe we'll finally get that Thanos reference to everything. Because that's what I want. I want Thanos to worship Death.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of little nods and things like that were a lot of fun. I will say, I want to talk about the meat of the movie.
Right. I just had to say that part because that was the Living Tribunal. I love that guy.
I gotcha. If you've been following the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at the end of Endgame, Thor goes off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And so we knew they were going to be in this movie. They'd been in the previews. We've speculated they were only going to be in the beginning. That is certainly what occurred. Yep. We saw kind of one battle scene with them, and then they split from Thor and Korg as they pursued Gore the God Butcher. Thor and Korg did. And I have to say that portion of the movie, which was the opening, didn't really work for me. And I was disappointed because I love the Guardians so much. I thought the vibe of Thor with the Guardians, the Asgardians of the Galaxy, was so much fun in Infinity War. And I was looking forward to seeing that some more. And it ultimately, it felt a little bit flat. It felt a little bit forced. It felt like the actors were like in different locations. Like it just didn't feel, there wasn't a whole lot of natural chemistry going on where we had felt that in Infinity War. And so I don't know if it was just, the script or if it was weird things going on with the performance, but that section of the movie didn't ultimately end up working that well for me.
Yeah. And to be honest, for me, and I don't know, Chris Pratt looked a little odd as like Star-Lord. Like he looked almost thinner. Like, I don't know if he's doing another role for another film or something. He looked thinner. his hair didn't look like Star-Lord's. Like he just almost didn't look like Star-Lord when I saw him. And I'm like, I need to go watch Endgame. Like, how did he look at the end of that one? Because I mean,
Yeah, and we don't know how long this has been.
Yeah.
But yeah, I clocked that too, that he kind of looked weird. And I will say that the place Thor starts in this movie, and this is a major running theme, because this is why Gore, is out to kill all gods, is that gods are detached and they don't care about people, right?
Right.
And Thor kind of starts in that place as well. Like he's in that opening battle, and again, I don't want to spoil anything, but he's kind of detached. He's not engaged in the battle at the beginning. It kind of waits until it's the final moment to jump in and save everyone, which is kind of like a Loki thing. Like Loki, your savior arrives, and it didn't work for me. Like that's not Thor's character. That's not who we've seen. And so it was pretty jarring to see him kind of be detached and then have to kind of get reconnected to, helping people, because that was the lesson he learned in the first Thor movie.
Exactly.
And it felt weird that he kind of had to learn that lesson again. And so his journey for me in this movie didn't end up working that well.
I kind of agree in that sense. I mean, it did feel like they were telling that same story again with him of like, oh, you got to rekindle who you are and all that. Now we can go through it's depression, it's PTSD. He's lost himself now. Like, so he kind of does need a little like kick in the butt to be like, hey, remember who you are, remember where you came from. But I don't know if I needed that with him, because I mean, again, this is a guy who's been around for thousands of years, essentially.
Yeah.
Yes, you lost your mom and dad, and that's important to every living creature.
Sure.
But at the same time, you've seen death so much on the battlefield. Like you should not be cold to it, but it should hit a little bit differently.
Well, and it's also that, and this was a similar problem I had with Doctor Strange. So slight spoiler for that movie as well, is that we're seeing characters in a different place than where we saw them last, and we didn't establish how they got there. So you could tell a story of how Thor became this detached person who is so beyond everything else that's going on. He's just like, as you said, spiral out of control, depression, PTSD, all those things, but they didn't give us that. And so we kind of have to put that on the movie. And that's where it doesn't end up working for me in this movie. Now, that said, I think this movie's still a lot of fun. It's got a lot of good action. I think Christian Bale does a really good job as Gore the God Butcher. So he's a very interesting villain that I end up liking. I like his story overall. There are some questionable like plot points that happen, and it is speeding through a lot of things. And there's aspects of it that work really well and other aspects that don't. I was very excited to get Jane Foster, Mighty Thor back with Natalie Portman.
Right.
And I thought her individual story of, battling cancer and becoming the Mighty Thor and all that, I thought that worked. But I was not on board with them giving us like a 5-minute montage of Thor and Jane's relationship and saying like, and they had this one true love and it fell apart, but they still love each other. And so for the rest of the movie, we're going to act like they're still in love. That part did not work for me. It felt like I was not on board with how quickly they fell back into, their relationship. I don't know about you.
No, and I agree with it. It would have worked if you would have gone with it's been a few months, maybe even a year. But you have the joke where Thor's like 8 years, 6 months, and 4 days, or whatever he says. And it's like, dude, 8 years especially for Jane, that's a long time.
And she might have been blipped. So maybe it's only 3 years for her.
Yeah.
We don't know.
And for Thor, though, that's a blink of an eye. Like legit a blink of an eye. I mean, a guy who doesn't age and 1,000 years old, like even in Korg says, he's loved pirates, he's loved this, he's loved that. And I'm like, 8 years is nothing to you, dude. Like 8 years should be like, again, you're talking about an entity who lives forever. Why does he keep track of 8 years, 6 months? That you're telling me all these other women that you probably, loved and they grew old and died essentially, or you broke up with them, they didn't mean anything to you. Like I didn't get that connection. And again, this is why with like characters like Thor and characters like Silver Surfer, those who can live forever, it's really hard for me to say like, oh, this is their love interest. You got to really build that this is a true solid love. Like these people, they're going to grow old together somehow and die. But you didn't. You had one movie with her as well. She wasn't in the, she wasn't the second one. So
she was in Dark World. Yeah.
And then we haven't seen her since then. You know, we get comments, oh, we broke up, or oh, this.
Yeah,
or,
we got a mention of her in Age of Ultron that they were still together. We get, you know, and then sometime shortly after that, they're not together anymore, because by the time Civil War rolls around and we have these Team Thor shorts, which I'm pretty sure are now canon because we got Daryl. We get Daryl back from Team Thor. And so he's clearly not in a relationship with Jane at that point.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been some time since they've been in this relationship. And I agree with you. Like, I think that this is a relationship that just hasn't been fleshed out enough for it to be, you know, that we always say, you know, show, don't tell. They've been telling us that these two have this like incredible bond, that this is the love of their lives. They're so connected. That's what they've been telling us, right. But they ultimately haven't shown it, and they tried to. And this is where like this isn't Taika Waititi's fault that they haven't done that in the rest of the MCU, that they haven't established this relationship as this epic love story. But he tried to kind of say, well, here's this montage that shows you they really were in love, and it just didn't end up working for me. So I'm glad we got Jane Foster back. I thought her story of, you know, making her own choices about, you know, whether to pick up the hammer or not, all those things, I thought that all worked really well. It was just kind of the love dynamic between the two of them. It didn't end up working as well for me. Exactly.
And I think that's where, like you said, it fell short. We got those like 5-minute montage of them. And to be honest, you know, kind of backtracking a little bit to the comments about like Thor and, you know, having to relearn that lesson. You know, we got a little 5-minute montage of that too, where it's like, oh, well, then he decided he went from God bod to dad bod back to God bod. And you got like the little montage of him working out. So you could also say at that point too, he's healing. So it's again, it doesn't, we're just like you said, we're just telling you he's okay. We're telling you he had to relearn this because of this. And then we, as the viewer, we have to like interpret it a certain way. Yeah. And with Jane, I loved her character. I will say that. I loved how she figured everything out. I love that we got the fact that she, in one scene, she's well, you know, it's already been said, she's dying of cancer, stage 4, and we see her tear the page out of the book and explain the was it the wormhole or the wormhole? Yeah. And I'm like, the guy's like, you tore a page out of your own book. And it's like, what happened? Yeah, now you know.
But now you like, understand wormholes.
But that, to me, that was so cool because that's like a scientist. They don't care what they break. As long as they can show you, like, hey, this is how it works. Yeah. And I did like though that we got I can't remember her name, Darcy's character in it.
Oh that's the character's name. Kat Dennings is
Kat Dennings. I couldn't remember her real name. That's what I was trying to go for.
Darcy is the character. Yes.
And then I can't remember the actor's name for Eric.
Eric Selvig. Yeah, that's
I can't remember his name.
It'll come to me in a second.
Yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, we didn't get all three of them in the room together because his was just like a little video call almost, or a video voicemail thing. But at least we see him and we get a conversation with her and Darcy again. And I love that. And I'm like, these side characters have grown on us, especially we saw Darcy in WandaVision. So, you know, I like that we're still getting them. They're still popping up and still helping everybody. So I love that aspect. But again, I agree with you. A lot of the other stuff falls short with it.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to mention before we get into the humor, because I think this is a Taika Waititi movie. It's, you know, coming after Ragnarok. So before we get into that, I want to just say, I was disappointed how little Valkyrie we got, because I love Valkyrie as a character. I thought she was fantastic in Ragnarok.
Thompson, right? Is her last name?
Tessa Thompson. And, you know, she was fantastic in Ragnarok. We got just very brief, you know, scenes with her in Endgame. You know, that wasn't the focus, but I was really hoping for a lot more of her in this movie. And we just got, it felt like she was, you know, sidelined for quite a bit of it. She's not around for the final battle. No spoilers, but it was one of those things where I was missing her presence in a lot of it. And the other thing that I will say is, and I don't know how you do it, and I'm not sure they should have done it, but an element that is lacking from this movie is a character like Loki. We didn't have anyone bouncing off of Thor in that kind of way. because
Right.
Tessa Thompson wasn't doing it. Korg is a totally different type of character. And it was just like, we needed a character who kind of is at a similar background and level as Thor, bouncing off of him. And that's where a character like Loki, just like their dynamic has been so great. And Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, through the first Thor movies, their dynamic is what makes all three of those movies really good. Like that's the best part of Dark World. Their dynamic in Ragnarok is awesome. They're great in the first Thor movie, like even in
Right.
Avengers, like they're back and forth. Like, and so this movie for me was lacking a character like that. I'm not sure how you could bring Loki back based on everything that happened in his story, in this
Right.
timeline, all those things, but it was missing something like that.
And to me, the character of Valkyrie could have kind of filled it a little bit, but we got so little of her, it didn't work. Because I did love her interact. Every time she was on screen, I loved seeing her. The comments about like her, she's talking to Thor about like Jane and like love and all that. And it's cute. Then we get the conversation with her and Korg's like talking about that.
I really like that.
And I loved it. Even the scene where they're not in Olympia, but they're where Zeus and everybody else are.
Oh yeah.
So she's even like, nah, let's just watch and see what happens. It's like, you could go save him, but let's just see what happens.
And I will. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say she could do it, I think. But again, like you said, they sidebarred her. It's just like, you're just gonna bring her out once in a while.
And I really wish they would have, because in Ragnarok, there's a lot of kind of sexual energy between the two of them.
Yes.
Where it's like they're acknowledging that they both find the other one attractive. Maybe they're not actually doing anything about it, but you can sense that it's there.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to this movie, he's been off. She's been,
the king,
ruling New Asgard as the king. And so all of those things. So I would have liked for them to at least have that be an element. And it just seemed like it just didn't exist anymore. Like as soon as Jane Foster shows up, he's completely, having like really the jealousy that should have been Tessa Thompson's was coming from Stormbreaker, which I have to admit, that whole element where like Mjolnir's back, Thor fought with Mjolnir for how many thousands of years.
Yes.
He wants his hammer back. He has this, even in Ragnarok, we get, but it sounds like you had a very special and intimate relationship with your hammer, and so, like we see that. And now we have Stormbreaker, who's kind of has like a little bit of sentience and is like, can see that he's pining after Mjolnir. And so like that actually was really working for me. I thought that was really funny, but I would have appreciated kind of that same dynamic with Jane and Tessa and Valkyrie having that same kind of like, because they're totally BFFs, which I like.
Yeah.
And so it would have added another element to have them also both kind of have maybe, this attraction to Thor. And is there a little bit of like, I understand the trope of, like a love triangle. And we know that Tessa Thompson's character, Valkyrie, is bisexual. Yeah. And so there's a opportunity for her to have that attraction still. Yes. And so I would have liked that. That's just something personally I would have enjoyed.
I agree. I think it would have been nice to, like you said, they're either BFFs and it's like Jane's jealous and it's like he's just like my brother, or it would have been nice to even get like a scene, maybe like they wake up in bed together. We're not seeing anything else, but to show that, hey, maybe something's going on. And then even Korg in the background, like when Jane and her meet, it's like, oh, this is awkward. Your new toy or your new girl is seeing your old girl with your old hammer. Like, how's this awkward? Like, have him say some lines about it and then be like, Thor just be like, dude, like bro code, like, come on, you're not supposed to be saying this. Like, that would have been a cool interaction to have. I mean, because then it could just be like, Valkyrie just be like, no, it was just a fling. Like I was just having fun, whatever. But and then just kind of you could have played off of it. But again, I don't like that we sidelined her so much. I want more Valkyrie. She's a good actress. Thompson's doing a great job for it. So yeah, I think they need to bring her out more. But like you said, the humor, which my favorite part of all the humor was right here. I love these guys.
And I'm glad that you did. I think I laughed the first couple times and then it got real old for me real quick. And that I think is the main thing that I had with this is, and I know I'm not the same as a lot of people, but like Guardians to Guardians 2, the humor felt like there was too much of it and it was forced at times for me. Like it wasn't as funny as the first Guardians. And this had the same dynamic as like Ragnarok, I think, is one of the funniest Marvel movies, and almost every joke works. And it's so much like all the callbacks are a lot of fun. And in this movie, it just felt like we were throwing more jokes and they weren't as funny. And we kept hitting the same beats. Like it was like, oh, here's another call. Oh, we're going to call back again to it. And sometimes you have that joke where it's like, it's funny. And then it's like, you do it a few more times and it's not as funny, but then you keep doing it and it gets funny again. And I didn't get that with this movie. The only running gag that worked for me was the Stormbreaker thing. Like that worked for me. Yeah. But all of the other ones fell flat for me. And it just, ultimately, this movie kind of felt like someone else stepped in and was like, I can do the same thing as Taika Waititi and I can make a Taika Waititi Thor movie, and just weren't as good at it. But it was Taika Waititi.
Well, I wonder if
it was everything felt a little bit stepped down and a little bit off. It's still a good movie, but it just wasn't as like spectacular as I was hoping.
And I agree. And it's something that I think I talked to Chris and your wife about. The opening part with the goats it bothered me. It dragged out a little too long. I told her I think it would have been funnier if the goats came out, nothing was said, and he's like, oh, you got me some goats. And they're like, yeah. And they start trying to do the back away thing, like real quick, like, no takesy backsies. And he's like, they're acting really weird. And then they scream. Then it would have been like, okay, that's funny. Because it's like, they're yours now. And you're like, oh, cute goat, so happy. And that's like, oh, they scream. Yeah. I mean, and there was times where it was kind of like funny, but I did like that. There's a scene where they're riding in and you get the music timed with it and they're screaming. And I'm like, okay, I like that. And then I liked when they hit the planet because they literally just hit a planet. And it's like, yeah, okay. But I agree. I think Stormbreaker's humor was probably my best for that. Because again, like you said, it's a love triangle with two hammers and Thor. It's literally what it comes down to. And I'm like, okay, I can live with this. This is fine.
And we get another like play scene, just like there was in Ragnarok, which had elements Damon, that were, right? And he returns, and I don't want to spoil the other cameos, because I thought it was funny again, but not as funny as it was in Ragnarok. And there's just a lot of elements like that where it's like we're kind of hitting similar beats to Ragnarok, and it's funny, but it's now we're inevitably comparing. Not only is it Taika Waititi, but they're literally doing very similar things that they did in Ragnarok.
Right.
And so it's like they're inviting the comparison, and it's not playing in Love and Thunder's favor when you look at it that way. And so that was again, I still like the movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm sure I'll watch it again. The storyline with Gore was a lot of fun, but ultimately it did disappoint me just a little bit because it wasn't as good as Ragnarok, which maybe my expectations were too high. But it just was one of those things where it's like, oh man, I wish it had been at this level, and it was kind of at this level. So it's still a good movie. I still recommend it, but it was one of those things where as soon as I got out of it, I texted another buddy of mine who hadn't seen it yet, and I said, if you were expecting Ragnarok, lower your expectations, because it's just not that good.
Yeah, and I've been telling people when you go watch it, yes, there's action, and don't get me wrong, but go in there, popcorn, and think of a comedy. I was like, that way you kind of bring those expectations down a little bit more, and you'll be happier, I think, with what you're getting. I agree with you, but I also wonder how much of this was, Taika Waititi, and how much is it Marvel Studios or Disney trying to step in saying, we want certain things now, because look, it worked really, really well right here. So let's do that again because people love that. That's where behind the scenes stuff, I wonder more and more, which we'll never know because Taika Waititi will never talk bad. Disney will never admit to that. Marvel will never admit to that. So it makes you just wonder those little things. But let's wrap up the non-spoiler part with our review. So number one, if it's we'll do what? 1 to 5?
1 to 10 is usually what we do.
Okay, so we 1 being Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Whoa. Neither one of us gave it a score that low.
I know. I just had to take shots at it. So all right, what are you giving it?
I'm going to give this a 6.5. Okay. It was fun. I enjoyed my time in the theater. It had good action. It had some elements of humor that really worked for me and others that didn't. I did like the villain storyline. There were characters that I wanted more out of. And even with the villain, I would say I wanted more with him because he was so good. There was one particular sequence that ended up not working very well for me, which we will talk about in spoilers in a minute. But overall, 6.5, it's a lot of fun. And I think it's a good movie. It fits in, somewhere in the middle of the MCU. It's not among the best movies. It's not a Ragnarok or an Infinity War, an Endgame. It's not at the level of those. But it's certainly better than, a lot of the other things. Multiverse of Madness is certainly one for me, or like Iron Man 2. It's not in that range either. It's somewhere in the middle. So about a 6.5 for me.
And I would say I'll give it about just a solid 6. I mean, even that's a little bit much for me, I think, but it's above average. And that's why I always put 5 as like, this is your average film. Yeah. And I say it's above that. The humor, like I said, I enjoyed like the goat scenes. I enjoyed the Stormbreaker scenes. But again, the stuff that lacks for me, such as there's no Valkyrie. And I kind of, we didn't even touch on this part. When we get Korg kind of giving us the recap of everything, we really did kill the Warriors 3. They're dead. I kind of don't like that because they're supposed to be a big part of Thor's life. And he was like, oh yeah, they did get killed by Hela. Like they didn't get brought back. Like nothing's going on with them. So it's kind of
and not just did they get killed, but literally Korg is like this guy, and I don't even know who that guy is. And you're like, it's funny because there's a lot of people that would feel that way that aren't like major comic fans. They'd be like, yeah, who were those guys? What happened with them? Like, it's kind of like they're playing it for jokes. But on the other hand, it is like, and these are like major characters in Thor's like, roster. And so it felt a little bit disrespectful.
It bothered me because yes, you could easily have been the trope of, oh, they weren't killed, they were just really badly injured, and maybe they come back. We did it with Sif. We didn't even touch on her, Lady Sif.
Yeah.
We did it with her. She's missing an arm. And that's how they bring her back. And it's like we could down with each Warriors 3, like, oh, now he's missing an arm, or he's missing a leg, or he's not in combat anymore because now his lungs were so damaged that he can't breathe in battle really well. So they're just teaching now. Like I would have been okay with that, like seeing Ray Stevenson in the background and I don't know the other actors' names. I just know Ray Stevenson because of Punisher.
Yeah, Ray Stevenson and the one of Zachary Levi, who is Shazam, played him in Dark World and Ragnarok. It was a different actor. It was Josh Dallas in the first one because Zachary Levi had like commitments. Like they wanted him the whole time. Yeah, they had to cast a different guy, but then they brought him back for the sequels.
See, and it would have been like again stuff like that. And again, I'm sure there's 100,000 reasons why they couldn't bring these guys back, or they just didn't want to. Could have just been like, oh, we're not going to fit him in.
Well, I miss them. When we get into spoilers, we can talk about how likely it is that we see them again.
Yeah. So again, 6.5 for you, 6 for me. This will be the end of our non-spoiler part right here. So if you want to like back out and just go enjoy the film, or if you just don't like hearing spoilers in general, go watch the film, enjoy it. Like I said, I look at it as, don't think of it as an action, think of it as a comedy with some action, and you might be a lot better on that one. So
all right.